That's not the live thing. No. Don't do that on Zoom. Okay.
Good evening and welcome to Mindful Vespers. My name is Matthew. I'm the priest here at the Southwedge Mission. This is Greg Woodsby, dance accompanist at SUNY Brockport. And we're here to share with you our practice. It's something we call an inter-practice space, an inter-spiritual space, where regardless of what language or tradition or lack of tradition you might come from that defines the sacred mystery or the object of your meditation, we gather together on this shared practice so we can bring our full selves without judgment, without shame, without comparison, but hopefully to learn from and to multiply the gifts of our practice together. So wherever you're at on your journey, whether you're a first timer or a very experienced meditator, welcome as we try to create a space at the intersections of music, meditation, and everything else we try to bring to ourselves and yourself as well. And turn it over to Greg to introduce our practice tonight. If you're on Zoom, welcome. Thanks to Paul tonight for helping to MC that. If you're on Facebook Live watching and you'd like to join us on Zoom, there is a link in the event description, and you can join us for a conversation afterwards. So turn it over to Greg.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Glad you're here. Anybody who's watching now, or if you're watching later, so glad you're practicing with us tonight. I might suggest that if you want to grab some headphones, that's a really good thing to do for this. We try and get as subtle into the sound as we can, and so listening to it through a good speaker or a good set of headphones will really help you get into the nuance of what's happening. Our camera just fell down. Apologies about that. Matthew will fix that for us here. I bought the cheap tripod. What a bummer. So, I'm over here too. We have backups for our backups. Here's where we're going tonight. So, as Matthew said, I'm an accompanist, a dance accompanist. I work with a lot of dancers, and I have learned so much from them. And one of the interesting and exciting things that they do is many of them will take a class that they call experiential anatomy, right? And so this is a class for the dancers to learn some information first about the anatomy, and then to take that information that they learn. So, maybe they're working on the shoulder, right? And so they learn about the structure of the shoulder, that it's a ball and socket joint, the various directions it can move, the muscles that go along with that. And then they don't that's not the point of the information. Then they take that information and they do a variety of somatic exercises around the body, around moving it, to try to get as deep into their experience and their feeling of the shoulder as possible. And what the information acts as a bit of scaffolding for them to know where to direct their attention. And we're going to work on a similar thing tonight, except we're doing it in the mind. We're doing it sort of through neuroscience. So this might be experiential neuroscience. I don't know. I thought of a lot of fun different ways to say this today. I was thinking, let's see, what was the other one? Experiential embodied cognition. I like the big phrases. So that's a possibility. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about some things that I have learned and love about how our brain works. I am not a neuroscientist. Perhaps my next career, if this music thing doesn't work out, that's where I'm going. And then we're going to use that information to try to feel those qualities in our mind. And this is very doable, and I think I hope you'll have a really nice experience with this. So, even as I'm talking right now, this can be a moment of meditation for you. You can, if you're reading or listening to something, in some ways you let those thoughts replace your own, and you just rest your focus on those thoughts and try to keep coming back to them. Use Matthew's music also as something to rest into. That's something that we try to do in this practice a lot, is to use the music as an object of meditation, something to notice all of the subtle details, the subtle and rich details about, and also to use it as a reminder, as a cue, when we're lost in thought, to come back, okay? So, I'm going to talk about the default mode network, Okay, so neuroscientists these days are thinking a little bit less about specific regions of the brain and what they do, and are thinking a little bit more about networks in the brain. And I'll briefly mention two other networks, the executive network and the salience network. So, and then we're going to focus on the default mode network. The executive network has to do with our executive functioning. You might have heard of people who have poor executive functioning. Matthew's smiling. He really wants to raise his hand right now. That's what he wants to do, but I've got his hands busy playing. Matthew sometimes says, and he'll talk about this, that he has poor executive functioning skills. I join him in this often. It's, when you can't get your to-do list done and your attention, flitters and flies away. Your executive network is the area of your brain that's in charge of focusing your attention and keeping your attention on something. And it's a really powerful network. We have really great, it's all a lot of it in the prefrontal cortex, some of the newest regions of the brain. We have a salience network. The word salient means something that is relevant, something that we need to pay attention to, that makes sense. And so the salience network is what scans the environment and tells us when we need to go to our executive network. It tells us what we need to put our attention on. So certainly you're out in the woods and you hear some rustling, and that's your salience network picks up on that and says, ooh, I gotta listen to that. I gotta pay close attention. And then we have the default mode network. Now, the default mode network is called that, the default, because when our brain isn't doing anything else, this is where we're at. So scientists will give people some hard math problems while they've got an EEG machine hooked up to their head. They give them the hard math problems, and then they tell them to stop doing the hard math problems, and at that moment, they start scanning their brain. And these are the regions that light up. And this network has to do with a whole number of sort of interrelated activities. It has to do with thinking about the past, thinking about the future, daydreaming, thinking about our place in society, our place among our social group, our place in the pecking order. And it sort of uses all of that information, past, the future, daydreaming, our place in society, to create our sense of self. This sense that I am Greg, who is here, and who is different from everything else. It creates those stories about us. Now, this default mode network is incredibly powerful. I mean, it's the difference between us and the tigers in many ways, right? We are not faster than the tigers. We are not stronger than the tigers, but we are much better about thinking about the past, about using it to find patterns that we can predict into the future, using those patterns in a group, in a team, and having this very strong sense of ourself that is an incredible motivator to keep us alive. So this default mode network has served us brilliantly, and still serves us brilliantly in so many ways. But you might already have a sense that it is also very strongly correlated and tied to anxiety and fear. So this whole thing is this beautiful, complicated, powerful part of the brain that kept us alive so well, and now in the 21st century just makes us neurotic. And if you have any experience even hearing about meditation or trying it yourself, you might have started to already make some connections. Because what is it that we're usually trying to do as we meditate? Well, we're trying to not think about the past, not think about the future, focus right on the present moment, not daydream and get lost in thought. Sometimes we really are thinking about our sense of community. Sometimes we really are thinking about compassion and empathy and things like that, for sure. But we're not usually thinking about our place in the pecking order necessarily. We're not thinking about how we stack up. And we're diminishing our sense of self. We're pulling away from that. And so you wouldn't be surprised that in experienced meditators, and even actually in beginning meditators, but much more so as you do the practice more, this region of the brain is what turns down. You scan somebody's brain who's meditating, and it's not like new things are lighting up. It's not like new things are happening. They're actually doing less. So we're going to play around tonight with that same sense that if you learned the anatomy of the shoulder, you can start to point your attention towards that as you move the shoulder, to use it with more efficiency. And so we're going to point our attention towards this default mode network, towards trying to feel it. The default mode network and the executive network are on a little bit of a seesaw. Usually one is working or the other's working. And that salience network is kind of the pivot of the seesaw. So we can use a bit of tools like curiosity is a really good one to turn on that salience network and say, ooh, let's get really invested in this other thing. And then we'll be in our executive network for a while, and then something is going to, it's absolutely going to, if almost nearly constantly, pull us back into that default mode network. And we want to watch that movement. We want to see what the quality of our brain is like at those different times, and just interrogate it, just feel it. Again, not that it's a negative thing, but that we do want to have a sense of control. We feel like flourishing might happen better if we have the ability to turn the volume down on that at times. So I'm going to turn it over to Matthew here in a minute. I'm going to take over. I'll play some music behind him, and he's going to talk a little bit more about his experience with this as we've been chatting about it, and then we'll get sort of deeper into our practice tonight. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. So as Greg kind of jokingly referred to it, I love the default mode network. It's where I live a lot of the time. Sadly, it's one of the reasons I know I need to keep developing my meditation practice, my mindfulness muscles, if you will. Father Thomas Keating, who is a Trappist monk in the Catholic tradition, who basically helped to really bring meditation practice into the Christian tradition anyway, talked about if you're engaging in contemplative prayer, it's not necessarily because you're a super spiritual person. Oftentimes, it's because nothing else has worked. So it kind of removes some of the this idea that we're all mystics and we're all super special. Although if you are a mystic, cool. But for a lot of us, we need meditation just because nothing else really works. And that's certainly often the case for me. I'm also, if you're an Enneagram person, I'm an Enneagram 6. So like the New Yorker says in Rent, fear is my life. Fear is my life. And I'm a counterphobic 6, so I express fear through kind of confrontation and anger. But it's still a real deal. I find myself often living in past memories, like Greg talked about, out of time and often in resentful places, or worrying about the future and trying to anticipate it using just this part of my being, my head, in order to try to control or micromanage or anticipate. And then what really just happens is I end up spending a lot of time in my head rather than a lot of time getting to know my head. One of the gifts, I think, of a mindfulness practice, a contemplative practice, is that it gives us, for better or for worse, the opportunity to get to know the contours of this default mode network. It helps us to meet our shadow, even to, as Jesus said, love our enemy, the enemy that sometimes we encounter within that keeps us from experiencing ourselves as we truly are, as beloved, as sacred, as fully alive. And it can be scary to meet that, what Thomas Merton called the false self. The self that is attached to what it has or what it does or what other people think about it, which lives in this the rhythms of the default mode network rather than in the flow of true and aliveness, true aliveness. The cool part is once we start to become aware of those contours and we practice through meditation, developing those muscles, I know it's helped me to not just flee from or to be afraid of, but to face this false self. And it gives me some freedom then to make some decisions. So like when I start to feel that kind of swimming feeling in the back of my head because I'm walking down the street and I'm starting to think of something that I'm resentful or angry about, rather than taking the rest of the block to get to church and resenting it, I can stop, take a deep breath, take that muscle motion that we practice during meditation and then use it in the real world, right? And say, actually, that's not who I have to be right now. I can walk the rest of the way as my true self, as the self that can look to the present moment and say, how can I live out my belovedness now? How can I live out of my true self? How can I make a choice? Greg shared a really cool quote, and I can't remember who it was by, but there's this quote he shared that it said, when is the best time to plant a tree? And the first answer is 10 years ago, right? But the next best answer is right now. Meditation is a chance to not only show ourselves what some of us might call grace, but also in being able to say, that's not me. Saying, not right now, to that false self, to that default mode network. We can also start to get used to saying yes, to be unafraid and to have courage to say yes to our true self. And that kind of acceptance which we find from within and we also give to ourselves and we encounter is what some of us might call grace. So meditation ultimately is a chance for those of us who are really bad at finding it other ways maybe, or who are also just looking to deepen that experience and cultivate it, is a chance to practice grace towards our false self, towards our true self, towards the present moment, towards one another. So it's worth practicing. It takes a lot of practice. It doesn't just come because you want it, but it does come as we pursue it. It will also find us, and we'll become more able to say, wow, that thing that I've done so much of my life, that doesn't have to be me, and I can find a different path. I can plant that seed right now that in 10 years might grow into the tree that I'm excited about. We can do that every moment. And knowing the contours of the default mode network will help us to plant those seeds again and again with freedom.
So we're going to take the next 10 minutes or so and try and sink into this. Find a comfortable position. Let your eyes close. And when we're noticing something, when there's something in our mind that we're trying to look at distinctly, it's a bit like we're dropping a pebble into a pond. And we want to watch the ripples as they arise and as they pass away. And so it's important that that pond be fairly still to start, which is why we use some sort of object of attention, of focused awareness, to settle ourselves down. This is a simple object, traditionally the breath, but also sounds, feelings in the body. You just pick one thing, and you notice every detail you can about it. As I'm listening to Matthew play this cyclical pattern, I notice the sound of his strings. I notice changes in dynamics. I notice the layers of tones. And I use each new note as a cue to come back. And I will get pulled into the stream of thought. At that moment, I can just notice with compassion, I was just thinking about, and gently note it as a piece of scaffolding. Because when we can see the river, we're not in the river. And then come back to steadying your mind again. What is here now?
Thanks again for joining us tonight for our midweek mindful Vespers. Thank you, Greg, for the tour of the mini lesson in neuroscience and for introducing us to the default mode network. We'd love for you to stick around if you're on Zoom and join us in conversation. If you're joining us live on Facebook and would like to jump over, please do so. We're going to have about a half-hour conversation time where we get to know one another, build some connections, listen to one another's experience, and hopefully learn from one another as well. If not, we hope that you'll join us back next week, same time at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. Next week, we have a special guest coming, a guest practitioner to help us explore these themes further. Greg, if you could tell us about our guest.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Our first guest. It's part of what we are really excited to do with this project. Is to invite all sorts of kinds of people into our practice. And this is somebody who has been really influential in my practice. The fantastic dancer, Christina Berger, is going to be joining us from Boston. And we're going to do some somatic exercises together. And then she and I will do a piece for us. Exploring the concept of thresholds and a liminal moment, so that it a little bit builds off of here. And then the week after that, on May 12th, we have a fantastic Rochester-based musician, Brendan Caroselli, who's going to be coming and playing some really, really beautiful percussion, tongue, drum. I can't even describe it. It's so beautiful. So we're really looking forward to all those things. Please stick around. We're going to end the Facebook Live session now and jump on and start chatting. And we're so glad you could practice with us tonight. It really means a lot to us.
For those heading out, go in peace, and we'll see you next week.